Putin has played himself. Trump has actually changed his mind, and Tomahawks are on their way to Ukraine. The US has allowed strikes on Russia. Moscow refuses to sit down at the negotiating table. Bilyadim has already been hit several times by Kosha. The Ukrainian Armed Forces have caused a blackout in Belgorod. There is still no electricity, water or internet. The occupiers are using oil tankers to launch drones at Europe. And in Donbas, a modern Su-57 fighter jet has been spotted for the first time. Meanwhile, a Russian drone was once again circling over Norway. But the Kremlin's plan failed in Moldova. In the parliamentary elections, the pro-European party of Maia Sandu won. All this and more. Coming up in the broadcast, my name is Katerina Kolahan. Let's start this informational Monday together. The US is considering supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. US Senator J.D. Vance stated that Donald Trump's administration is actively discussing the possibility of selling these cruise missiles to European NATO allies for further transfer to Ukraine. However, the final decision on this deal rests with Trump.
This is an issue on which the president makes the final decision. The president acts in the interests of the United States of America. This is the main principle of his foreign and defense policy, which we will also apply to the issue of Tomahawks. I'll let the president speak for himself, but I know that we are discussing this issue right now.
However, back on September 26th, Axios, citing a source in the White House, reported that the president refused to approve the sale of Tomahawks to Ukraine, despite the fact that this system had been included in the list of weapons requested by the Ukrainian authorities several months ago. The article states that during a recent visit by Volodymyr Zelensky, he personally raised the issue of purchasing Tomahawks, but Trump refused. This is the only item in Ukraine's request that was not approved, while all other positions were supported. Zelensky has repeatedly emphasized that Tomahawks could serve as additional leverage on the Kremlin to move towards diplomacy, without necessarily using them right away. If we have this, it will force Putin to come to the negotiating table, the Ukrainian president stated. Trump, for his part, said that he would work on this, but the final answer is still unknown. Moreover, Russia has rejected negotiations with Ukraine. According to Vance, Moscow has, in the past week, refused bilateral meetings with the Ukrainian side, as well as trilateral consultations involving American officials, including President Donald Trump. According to the US Vice President, Russia continues to ignore proposals for a diplomatic resolution, despite significant losses on the front and a lack of substantial military successes. Vance says that the Kremlin needs to wake up and accept reality.
The Russians are killing many people, losing many of their own, and have nothing to show for it. We strive for peace, but it takes two to tango. Unfortunately, the past few weeks have shown that the Russians are refusing bilateral meetings with the Ukrainians. They are also refusing trilateral meetings, where the president or another representative of the administration could sit at the table with the Russians and Ukrainians.
Trump has allowed Ukraine to carry out long-range strikes on the Russian Federation, according to the White House Special Representative for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg. In an interview with Fox News, he said that the decision was confirmed by Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Rubio. He noted that the administration's position is underscored by the fact that there are no safe zones for Russian military operations. And Trump, as Commander-in-Chief, has the final say, and all agencies must follow his directives. According to Kellogg, some strikes will still require additional approval from the Pentagon.
Now, we're talking about long-range strikes on Russia? Yes.
A massive blackout has hit Belgorod in Russia. This happened after a series of explosions. The strikes hit the local thermal power plant in the city center and 2 electrical substations. The outages also affected neighboring settlements. Local residents report not only a lack of electricity, but also water and internet, so they got up and lit candles. However, local Governor Gladkov says the power outage is due to adverse weather conditions. And the lack of electricity, it seems, will not allow everyone to see the video of the moment of the Potek being hit.
Peter. No way. Where have we ended up? to then, so
Russian officials say that due to the power outage in Belgorod, the sirens won't work, and now local residents will have to identify missile and drone attacks by ear. And it seems that the situation in Belgorod is a rehearsal for Volodymyr Zelensky's plans. The president of Ukraine stated that if the Russian Federation threatens a blackout in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia. So next, more details on how Ukraine will turn off the lights and heat in Moscow.
Russians, including Muscovites, should start preparing for a cold and difficult winter. If Russia does not stop its strikes on Ukraine's energy facilities, Moscow will face a blackout.
There is no need to be overly cautious in our rhetoric with the Russians. If Russia sets a blackout in Ukraine as its goal and pursues this goal every winter, I am not sure that our response or that of our partners should be any different. If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know that there will also be a blackout in the capital of Russia.
Ukrainian strikes and domestic production of drones and missiles are the best argument in any negotiations with Putin because the Kremlin only understands the language of force.
If any attempts to attack the Kremlin are indeed made, how exactly will we respond to that particular situation?
Our Supreme Commander-in-Chief, the President, has already spoken on this topic, so there's no need to talk about it, and everyone understands this.
For the first time since the beginning of the war, on the eve of winter, Ukraine, thanks to its own production as well as supplies from its allies, has achieved parity in long-range capabilities with the occupiers.
Taking into account the climatic features of the Russian Federation and the tactical and technical characteristics of the Ukrainian side's strike capabilities, the Russian Federation is facing a harsh winter. Quite literally, we are bringing it upon them. First of all, this concerns thermal power plants and other industrial facilities that support the vital functions of major Russian cities.
To carry out strikes on regions and cities bordering Ukraine, Kyiv has a wide range of Western missiles at its disposal.
After the recent and significant statement by the Ukrainian president regarding his detailed conversation with the former American President Donald Trump, during which the critical issue of potentially striking energy facilities within the Russian Federation was explicitly raised as a possible and necessary response by Ukraine to the ongoing hostile actions and aggressive provocations by Russia, an appropriate and carefully considered response was subsequently received. Therefore, we can say that accordingly, the territories of the Rostov, Kursk, and Belgorod regions are not within the range of Western strike systems. Let me emphasize this again, such as the Scalp, Storm Shadow, as well as the modernized version of the S-200 missile complex.
The systematic destruction of Russian oil refineries by Ukrainian drones demonstrates this. Russian air defense is unable to protect critical infrastructure facilities.
In several districts of the Belgorod region at gas stations, only a 100 gasoline and diesel fuel are available. Subscribers are also reporting problems with diesel fuel in the Nizhny Novgorod and Samara regions. It would be very unfortunate if in the 4th year of the war we still can't destroy their energy sector, but they manage to destroy ours.
If, for strikes on the Russian border, Ukraine can use Western missiles and its own drones, then for Moscow and other remote cities, the real threat comes from Ukrainian drones with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and a warhead of 1,000 kilograms.
Usually, the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. What does a one-ton warhead provide? When it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles can completely disable it for at least a year. That is, a single crater will be about 20 meters in diameter.
A mirror response will definitely follow if they try again to cut off electricity and heat to Ukrainians. The Russian leadership is doomed to experience all the hardships of blackouts. Millions of Russians.
Zelensky stated that Russia is using sea tankers to launch drones against European countries. According to him, this is yet another indication that the Baltic and other seas should be closed to Russian tankers, at the very least to the Shadow Fleet. At the same time, monitoring groups have recorded a new tactic by Russia. For the first time, Shahed drones are now being launched from a new location, the Kacha airfield on the western coast of Crimea. This is already the 12th location for such launches. The equipment at this facility allows the flight time to be reduced to 40 minutes after launch. The Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine warns of a particular threat to the regions of Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Kherson. There, air raid sirens will now sound even earlier. The Kacha airfield is located near Sevastopol. Previously, it was used by the aviation of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. By the way, Kacha is the very airfield that was recently visited by GUR drones, which burned several planes there. Ukrainian good drones struck the Karachevsky Electrodetal plant in Russia's Bryansk region. The enterprise specializes in manufacturing electrical connectors and couplings for military equipment. According to the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, the plant's products are used in missile control systems, aviation and space technology, armored vehicles, communication complexes, and control devices. Without these components, the assembly and repair of modern weaponry, including missile systems and aviation equipment, is disrupted. According to preliminary data, the strike caused damage to production facilities. All indications suggest that this will lead to delays in supplies for the Russian army. For the first time, Russia has deployed fifth-generation Su-57 fighter jets in the Donbas. This was reported by the Ukrainian military telegram channel Sonyanik, which specializes in aviation and air defense topics. Experts note that these aircraft are well prepared for operations in the combat zone despite the limited number in the Russian Aerospace Forces inventory. The Su-57s have been spotted in areas of Donetsk Oblast, where they are likely being used for strike support and reconnaissance. As of September 2025, according to media estimates, Russia has approximately 40 of these Su-57 units in service.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
These aircraft are equipped with advanced radars and long-range missiles. They are capable of detecting air defense systems at distances of up to 300 kilometers without entering the engagement zone. In addition, the military also report the appearance of a modernized A-50 in the Kherson direction, which is slowly trying to return to operation, although the Su-35 often operates here instead. These aircraft cost over $300 million each, and there are very few of them in the Russian Aerospace Forces. By the end of 2023, there were only 7 on the books, and only 3 A-50s were actually able to take to the skies. More details about the latest events at the front and around it coming up in the report.
They are suffering colossal losses, but still keep advancing without any results. The Russian army still hasn't given up hope of seizing at least a small piece of new Ukrainian territory. Nearly 200 combat clashes were recorded on the front line over the past day. The Russian invaders are most active in the Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka directions. Across all front lines, the enemy carried out 81 airstrikes, dropping 156 guided aerial bombs on Ukraine. Additionally, over the past day, the enemy conducted 5,118 shellings and launched more than 6,000 drones at Ukrainians.
Our fighters are working at maximum capacity in Donetsk region right now, especially the drone operators there. In Donetsk region, it's also important to acknowledge that the concentration of enemy aircraft is simply off the charts, with 3 to 4 planes patrolling around the clock, 24/7.
But while the occupiers were striking peaceful cities and shopping centers, our aviation targeted only military facilities of the Russian army. In particular, the armed forces of Ukraine carried out a high-precision airstrike on the occupiers' positions in Donbas. According to Ukrainian intelligence, enemy infantry was stationed in 2 buildings, and the 3rd Army Corps sent all its personnel to a concert with Kobzon. Meanwhile, in the Pokrovsk direction, our brave defenders were not merely hunting Russian infantry, but rather actively targeting the enemy's heavy and formidable equipment. Despite all the desperate efforts of the crew, the enemy tank was ultimately unable to escape from our persistent and highly effective drones.
Everything has now completely stabilized in the Sumy region. These particular territories, which are currently behind the Russian military forces in the Sumy region, simply cannot be accurately called a buffer zone at all.
Russian troops carried out 6 attacks in the Kupiansk direction. Ukrainian defenders repelled enemy assaults near the settlements of Petropavlivka, as well as towards Pishchane and Bohuslavka. There, and not only there, the enemy has begun to use a new horrific tactic. In order to save resources, Kremlin generals have started sending their soldiers into attacks without armor or proper equipment.
The enemy understands this perfectly well and is betting on the speed of their movement, on lightness, mobility, and so on, because it has been noticed more than once that they run somewhere to Akulits, to Shevchenko, and start searching, looting their own dead, picking up body armor, helmets, and so on.
In this manner, the enemy stormed the positions of the Ukrainian Armed Forces 15 times in the Lyman direction, trying to break through the defense in the area of the settlements of Kolodiasi and Torske. But in the Dobropilya direction, the enemy is no longer eager to attack. There, on the contrary, they are desperately trying to break out of the encirclement.
That's why the units here, indeed in the Dobropilya direction, have carried out these encirclements, creating what are essentially cauldrons for the occupiers, which will be officially announced in due course. Although, as they say, it's not that simple, and in some locations, physical expulsion of the enemy is still ongoing. It's still too early to speak of a complete encirclement of the enemy.
Thanks to the coordination and prompt actions of our defenders, several hundred Russian occupiers were trapped in an improvised cauldron, according to the General Staff. Even more invaders were eliminated during the latest battles, the military reports.
Wherever there is an enemy, and wherever he is cut off from his surroundings, that's about 300 square kilometers plus additional territory. Now, this whole story is unfolding in the Dobropilya direction. The occupiers' losses in this operation, according to preliminary estimates, amount to almost 3,000 people, most of whom are irrecoverable. According to the president, the exchange fund is also being replenished. But this is what's happening in the north.
Meanwhile, in the east, our border guards continue to harass the occupiers. The day before, they managed to set a new daily record by neutralizing as many as 60 Russian soldiers with drones. And here, border guards from the Phoenix unit are already striking at the enemy's logistics in Donetsk region. As a result of the drone raid, our defenders managed to destroy at least 3 motorcycles, a quad bike, a car, and 2 Russian army vans together. Among the high-value targets were a truck loaded with ammunition and a T-80 tank. The Unmanned Systems Unit also showcased the results of their work over the weekend. The day before, they struck 3 gas distribution stations in the temporarily occupied territory of Luhansk region. As a result, disruptions began in the region.
Water barely drips from the taps, the blue fuel in the gas stove is no longer so blue, and soon, who knows, the lights might start flickering too. Well, that's what happiness looks like. Hurts the eyes and stings. The gas distribution station in Shchastia, Luhansk region, has been the main source of gas for the Luhansk TPP since the occupation of this part of Ukraine. The Luhansk TPP was forced to switch to operating on coal.
But even behind the border, the occupiers can't hide from the Ukrainian Armed Forces and their drones. Proof of this is the latest high-profile operation by the Security Service of Ukraine. Drones from the security service destroyed the Tingovatovo oil pumping station. This is in the Chuvash Republic of the Russian Federation, 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine. It is known that the station's operations have been temporarily suspended until the extent of the damage to the facility is determined. However, judging by the rumors, the company has suspended its operations for a very long time.
Drone provocations in Europe continue. Another drone was spotted last night over the Brønnøysund airport in Norway. Several flights as a result had to be redirected back to the capital, and the airport itself was temporarily closed. Norwegian police are investigating the incident. Denmark also scrambled 2 F-35 fighters after numerous reports from local residents about unidentified objects in the sky over the island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea. This was reported by the TV2 channel's website citing Danish police. However, there have been no official statements from representatives of the armed forces so far. According to law enforcement, the jets were scrambled after dozens of reports about large drones circling over the waters. All of this is happening on the eve of the very same Tues in Copenhagen. The Danish Ministry of Transport has announced a ban on civilian drone flights until the end of the week, while the country is hosting European leaders. The pro-European ruling party Action and Solidarity, led by Moldovan President Maia Sandu, is confidently leading in the parliamentary elections, gaining over 50% of the votes, according to the results of counting almost 100% of the ballots. This expression of will is considered key for the country's geopolitical course. These elections took place against the backdrop of accusations of massive Russian interference, including disinformation, voter bribery, and cyber attacks. Despite this, the Moldovan people made their European choice. Maia Sandu's party will receive at least 51 seats, which constitutes a single-party majority. The pro-Russian Patriotic Electoral Bloc is gaining just over 24%. Pro-European blocs such as Alternative, our party led by Renato Usatii, and Democracy at Home are also entering parliament. President Sandu has already congratulated Moldovans on the victory of democracy. For the blind Hungarian officials, Ukraine's chief diplomat Andriy Sibiga demonstrated the route of the Hungarian drone that was detected in Ukrainian airspace over Zakarpattia. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is demanding official explanations as to what exactly the drone was doing over our territory. "Stop bothering us," retorted Prime Minister Viktor Orban on his social media. Tensions between official Kiev and Budapest are rising with each passing day. Next, we'll discuss what Ukraine and Hungary are accusing each other of and what risks this poses for both sides.
Espionage in favor of Moscow, provocation for personal interest, or simply unskilled work by drone operators. Within a few days, instead of explaining what their drones were doing in Ukrainian airspace, Hungary opted for a familiar Kremlin tactic. "We're not there."
Admitting this publicly, of course, is not in the interest of the Hungarian government.
However, the story of the Hungarian drone in Ukraine is only gaining momentum, accumulating more and more facts.
One drone has been recorded, and there is corresponding movement. I asked to show it to people because they say we're making things up.
In response, there was a statement from official Budapest saying that Zelensky is seeing ghosts, and that there was no drone at all. But then our Ministry of Foreign Affairs presented not just accusations, but a confirmed route of the Hungarian UAV, and with a demand to explain what that was about.
For the blind Hungarian officials, here is the exact route of yesterday's drone incursion from Hungary into Ukrainian airspace. Our armed forces have gathered all the necessary evidence, and we are still waiting for an explanation from Hungary as to what this object was doing in our airspace.
At the same time, our military and analysts have provided their own explanations. According to one version, Hungary may have staged this provocation as a way to retaliate against Ukraine for the sabotage on the Druzhba pipeline. And not without advice from their partner on the other side of the border.
I have a suspicion that Orban is simply copying Putin's tactics. Just like Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, launches his aggressive drones against various Western countries. This initially worked against Poland. Now we see unidentified drones flying over some northern countries. Denmark, Norway, Sweden. They've also been spotted in the north of France. They can't figure out what these drones are or where they're coming from.
Another Russian trace in this story has already been uncovered by investigative journalists. So, with just a few hours difference, Hungarian media controlled by Orban and Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova reported on it. They made almost identical statements. They claimed that Ukraine, in response to the drone incursion, would now send drones to Europe itself, specifically to Romania and Poland. However, these drones would be Russian, assembled from parts of downed Shaheds in Ukraine. In other words, if something happens in the West involving Russian drones, just know in advance it was Kyiv.
Judging by the very specific way their propaganda is consistently presented, always trying to significantly downplay their own potential threats, I absolutely wouldn't rule out the possibility of a truly serious attack. I just recently saw a comprehensive review of precisely how they behave on various social media platforms. And it's clear that Russian bots are actively pushing the insidious idea, not that they truly need to defend themselves more vigorously and perhaps give considerably less to Ukraine, but rather they are deliberately downplaying the inherent danger and serious implications of these ongoing attacks. So this could mean that they are preparing something more serious.
Another theory as to why a Hungarian drone ended up in Ukraine is simply reconnaissance work in favor of Moscow.
Many military experts note that in this way, intelligence is gathered and then simply transmitted or sold to Moscow. Unfortunately, this is also possible.
And unfortunately, there is already indirect evidence of this. After a recent similar incident, during the next Russian shelling, a strike was carried out specifically on Zakarpattia.
If it can be proven that they then directed their attention in Zakarpattia to the American company that was producing coffee machines there, I think Trump's praise for Orban will change, and he will definitely have to answer for it.
Zelensky also noted that such reconnaissance activity along the route of the Hungarian drone is very suspicious. The president refrained from direct accusations, but there was no shortage of hints that Kiev understands everything. Very
important what they are studying. This is very important, what the Hungarian intelligence officer is studying on the territory of Ukraine. I basically understand what it is. And I believe that they are doing very dangerous things, first and foremost for themselves.
And as for the main culprit of the festivities, Viktor Orban, after the verbal spat between our foreign ministries, he also decided to make a statement, though it would have been better if he had kept silent.
Hungary is a member of NATO and the EU. Ukraine would have fallen long ago without the support of NATO and the EU. Mr. Zelensky, with all due respect, stop bothering us.
By the way, I'd like to add that without EU support, Hungary wouldn't have even gotten on its feet. For years now, the Orban regime has existed solely thanks to EU subsidies. And the more provocations come from Budapest, the greater the chances that Hungary will be left without this support.
While Hungarian officials fail to grasp the scale of the problem, even Ukrainian cats know what's really going on. One such cat from Kyiv became a social media star thanks to his unique reaction to shelling. Just look at that expression on his face. That's all I have time to share for now. Hit like under this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most interesting news. See you? We understand that Hungary in the EU is always hard to figure out.